original iPhone. It was too expensive for me for home, and it didn't even have a keyboard, so how could it possibly appeal to business customers, right? And you might sit there and you might think, yeah, she might be right, but what can this lady possibly have in common with the greatest visionary of his generation? The same things that most of us do. Every now and then, I get ideas that are to be misunderstood or even discarded by others. And no amount of duration of degrees or credentials can help me to prove my point. You see, if you want to ask me, what is it that I do for a living, I would probably tell you something along the lines of, I research different aspects of PhD integrations. But what the hell does it really mean? I could elaborate, of course, that it stands for integration of financially material, environmental, social, and governance factors into mainstream corporate and investing strategies. But it wouldn't make it any easier, would it? Try saying something like that in a casual conversation on your day off, and you would probably get a pair of like very googly eyes as a response. In fact, this googly eye situation happened even if you are sitting right in front of London Stock Exchange as the conversation is happening. But my ambition today is not to talk to you about London. Luckily, in London, we're already talking about mainstreaming green and sustainable finance. My ambition today is to talk to you about bringing this industry back to Kazakhstan with its traditional economy. You know, I always think of you in innovative ways. Oh, I didn't. You know, I always think of new and innovative ways to explain what full HD integration really is. And knowing that I would be speaking to a predominantly female audience in a country where women were never particularly discouraged from watching Disney movies, one particular analogy kept sneaking into my mind. And I'm a bit of a feminist, so you can't possibly imagine how much it pains me to give you a Disney-based reference. But a leading expert on delivering TED Talks suggests that we are supposed to go to the most unexpected places as we are trying to find a good metaphor. So if you do have an issue with my decisively non-feminist analogy today, you can blame brilliant advice by Carmen Gala. You can even tweet to him. Here's his Twitter handle, by the way. But back to ESG integration. ESG integration is essentially that magic wand that can affect stock exchanges, pension funds, environment, different social factors, even the entire financial system if you do it right. And essentially, if your fairy godmother or your asset manager does it right, then the pumpkins, the little pumpkins that you invest today can turn into eco-friendly, socially responsible carriage by the time you retire. So, in the spirit of full disclosure, I must say that although I'm not a fan of fairy tales, I'm all up for demystified magic. And, you know, ever since I remember myself, I had this desire to do something magical, whether it is eradicating poverty or curing cancer. So, my early flirtations with charity sector have left me with huge concerns over the efficiency of that industry. So when I finally found the market-based mechanism of doing something good, it felt like I was meant to be in that industry. So I would call my mom and I would tell her all the things, all the environmental and social impact that this industry can have. And at times I would get too carried away and she would say, and I quote, "Yelena, it's not some TED talk." And we would talk about something else. But at other times, she would say, "You sound so passionate about it that I don't even know what would you do without it. What would you do here in Kazakhstan?" And this rather rhetoric question would linger in my mind for days, for months, for years. I knew perfectly well that this industry hasn't made its waves in Kazakhstan yet. But I also knew that Kazakhstan could use this magic touch of ESG integration wand. But that conviction was the only thing that I had at that point, apart from my skills, that is. I can vividly remember going to some sort of University College London Korea mixer back in 2011 or 2010, and I would tell to the representatives of the top Kazakhstani employers what it is that I was doing for a living. And they would say, to be quite honest, we are not sure what it is that you do. And to be quite honest, we are not sure how would you fit in our organization, but you can leave us your CV. And of course, they would never call back because quite simply, there was no such industry in Kazakhstan yet. The situation hasn't changed much even like a few years later, when by 2015, I would routinely search for such terms as ESG Kazakhstan on Google, and it returned 0 relevant results. I did, however, feel like there could have been like a little lifeline, however remote it might have been. You see, in a lot of ways, ESG integration is related to a much older, significantly less confusing discipline called corporate social responsibility, or CSR. And if you're not familiar with the concept of CSR yet, then for the purposes of this discussion, you can think of it as another magic wand that only works half of the time, if it works at all, in fact. So what I needed to do is essentially to substitute one magic wand with another magic wand, and it sounds like it's fairly doable, right? Or so I thought. A quick manipulation of available data might suggest that Kazakhstanis have become 2.9% more aware of CSR as a concept between 2009 and 2013. And this 3% growth over a 4-year period might seem impressive before you consider the fact that CSR is the old industry. I mean, you can trace the first modern mentions of 1950s social audits in George Goider's book, The Responsible Company, for example. So even when it came to the old tools, the old magic wands, Kazakhstan still had 6 decades to catch up with. And this catching up process wasn't fast enough. If the awareness of CSR continued rising at a rate of 2.9% every 4 years, then we would only reach full CSR awareness by the year 2040. And only after that, we would move to ESG integration. And to put it into a more global context, for example, South Korean entities have no problem adopting rather advanced practices, ESG integration practices even now. And yet their National Assembly Budget Office calculated that their national pension fund might be depleted by the year 2053 if the full ESG integration practices are not achieved anytime soon. This adoption of CSR practices wasn't fast. It was not just some statistics that convinced me in that. I also knew it from my personal experience. In 2015, I uploaded a document on CSR in Kazakhstan to a website that allowed me to geotag the reads that it was getting. And to my surprise, it was not just European scholars who were on average more interested to learn about CSR in Kazakhstan. It was also scholars from such unexpected countries as Tanzania or Kenya who were surprisingly more interested to learn about CSR in Kazakhstan than the actual Kazakhstanis were. Apparently, I wasn't the only one to recognize that CSR adoption wasn't fast enough. That's why the national concept policy on corporate social responsibility was being developed by a number of parties. But things were not that rosy either. Remember I said that CSR was another magic wand that just worked less effectively? Well, it was about to become even less effective. The drafts that they were drafting were getting thinner and thinner, and the goals that they were setting for this document were getting less ambitious. What did it mean for me? For me, it meant that I had significantly less chances to bridge ESG integration agenda to the emerging CSR agenda. And by that time, luckily enough, a reputable international organization announced a call for public policy proposals. And if you know anything about ESG integration, you would wonder, why would you go the public policy route? After all, it's a relationship between corporates and investors that we are talking about here. But if you do know something about Kazakhstan, then you would wonder if you really can affect change without having a solid public policy in place. So I decided to make it work with whatever I had. But I also knew that public policy needs to be built on something, and there was not enough to build on. Quite frankly, I was the only person who talked about, ESG integration in the country, so there were no people I could interview, and the annoying Google search was still returning 0 results. But I decided to make it work with whatever I had. I would interview anyone who had something to do with CSR or environment or social public policy or anything like that. And also they were tackling very different issues. By putting those tiny little bits together, I could draw some kind of a picture. And, I can say that those little complications proved to be a blessing in disguise, because the more I chased those seemingly unlikely people, the more I realized that we all actually want the same thing. I mean, we all want to witness positive social and environmental changes. We all want our stock markets to be sustainable. We all want our pension funds to be investing safely and without compromising our ability to reach the retirement age. So somehow the message started spreading. And at times, I didn't know how exactly the message was spreading, as it usually happens with public policy. But at times, I did. For example, the Ministry for Investment and Development recognized synergies between my work and the OECD-related agenda. But at other times, I didn't know, but I could still see the results. In December 2016, Kazakhstan Stock Exchange, that is right there, introduced the methodology for ESG reporting, and it's a big win. And another point that was interesting, that European Bank for Reconstruction and Development started their own project on green financial system in Kazakhstan. And also those Finnish experts who were drafting it are focusing on green bonds. They also mentioned ESG as a term once. So none of these developments could have been imagined in November 2015 when I sent my application for public policy, but I smile every time I run a Google search for ESG Kazakhstan, and it returns more and more and more results. I kid you not, we still have a long way to go, but we are already moving there. So I want to leave you with one thought. Mahatma Gandhi once said, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." And if you have some dream for yourself, for your country, maybe even for the entire world, it doesn't matter, then maybe you should consider this thought. If something doesn't exist in your country, then maybe, quite possibly, you exist to create it.